also read, and I am not joking here, I am not over-exaggerating in any way at all, but I read literally the worst book that I have ever read in my 25 years of existence on this world. It was so terrible. Hi, hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new around here, welcome to my channel. My name is Ash and I like to read books. Today I thought we would go through all of the books that I read in November and just, have a nice chill chat about them. In November I read 11 books, which is quite surprising to me because I literally went from reading 0 books for the rest of the year to reading 11 books in a single month. And this is the exciting thing, I'm really picky with what I give 5 stars to, but I think I had 3 5-star reads this month, which is really good because I just really enjoyed the books that I read. I also read, and I am not joking here, I am not over-exaggerating in any way at all, but I read literally the worst book that I have ever read in my 25 years of existence on this world. It was so terrible. So I got my first 1-star book as well, and I think we'll go through in star rating order, so we will talk about the worst book that I have ever read first. My first and currently only 1-star read is Killing the Dead by Richard Murray. This book was just the biggest disappointment that I could possibly imagine. Basically, it sold itself to me on the fact that it was a serial killer in a zombie apocalypse, and I was like, oh, how is he gonna deal with that? How is he gonna, make friends while still being a serial killer? Because, you need a group to survive in a zombie apocalypse. And do you know how he made friends in a zombie apocalypse being a serial killer? He just let some girl boss him about and tell him to stop serial killing. And he did. I appreciate that it's a short story, it's only 100 odd pages, so it's definitely more of a novella, but even then it felt really bare bones. It was really slow, not a lot happened. I wouldn't even say that it was a particularly bad episode of The Walking Dead, because The Walking Dead is only an hour long, and this took me 2 hours to read. It was literally like reading someone's first draft. So it was full of grammatical errors, spelling mistakes. It just wasn't very clear who was talking sometimes. There was no description. I think I was halfway through before I realised it was set in England, but I don't know where in England. Nothing was really concrete. The characters are really annoying, so I liked none of the characters in this book for various reasons. Also, sidebar, there is a weird thing that happens in this book where the main character meets a woman and immediately assesses them as pretty or not. The first woman he meets when the zombie apocalypse starts, he basically sums her up as pretty and then decides he wants to stay with her because she doesn't freak out that he killed someone. But I don't know why she doesn't freak out that she killed someone. Obviously, this is the first in a series, and what I've read of other people's reviews, they've said that the series as a whole is a more complete book, but it's still not very good. There's no character development in this first portion, I guess, in this first novella. There's not really much of a story. It kind of ends on a cliffhanger in the way that The Walking Dead would do, where they meet a bad group of people and gear up to go and get them, and then the episode ends. That's where the novella ends. It's really annoying. And I really, really dislike the main character, which I imagine I'm supposed to because he is a serial killer, but I don't dislike him for being a serial killer because he doesn't do that much murdering. I dislike him because he just feels like a proper skeeve. It was just a very weird feeling. I was literally sitting there thinking to myself, because there's a child character in the book, she's 8 years old, her name's Maggie, and she runs over to hug Ryan, the main character, the serial killer, while her mum's there, and I was literally thinking, I would not let my child anywhere. There's a fucking motorbike. I would literally not let my child anywhere near this person, even if I didn't know they were a serial killer. They just come across as such a skeeve. So this was a 1-star book. It was the most unenjoyable read that I've ever done, and it's quite possibly the worst book that I've ever read. Moving on to my 2-star reads, the first of which was Twelfth Night by William Shakespeare. I had to read this, I didn't have a choice, it was for my university course, and it was okay. I don't particularly enjoy reading plays because they don't have a lot of description anyway, by virtue of them being plays and being mostly dialogue. I also don't particularly like Shakespeare's writing. I just don't like William Shakespeare's works in general. I am a bad English literature student. However, Twelfth Night is definitely one of the more enjoyable ones, mainly because it's a comedy and there's no sad, tragic death at the end, which is quite nice. And I did enjoy the fact that the focus on the love at the end was more on a familial reunion, although I do kind of wish, and this is spoilers, but I really don't think it matters because this work is hundreds of years old. And if you don't know the ending to Twelfth Night, you're probably never going to read it anyway. I don't like the fact that everyone gets paired up in the ending. Viola and Duke Orsino get married, and then Sebastian and Olivia get married, having barely spoken to one another because she thinks he's Cesario, but Cesario is actually Viola in disguise, working as Duke Orsino's handyman. That's not the right word. Who doesn't know that Cesario is actually Viola in disguise? So the fact that they all get married at the end is a bit weird to me. I would have just preferred Sebastian and Viola, who are twins, to meet back up and to be like, oh my god, my brother, my sister, I thought you were dead. End. I don't really like the coincidence at the end. I don't really like the fact that everyone gets paired up. And I really don't like Shakespeare in general. But the enjoyable parts, the fact that this wasn't tragic and it was okay to read, I didn't get bored while reading it, has bumped it up to 2 stars. Next up, 3-star reads. The first one being The Elephant Vanishes by Haruki Murakami. I have had Murakami books recommended to me a few times, so I picked one up randomly and it just so happened to be a book of short stories. They were really good. A few of them I really enjoyed. I don't remember the titles, but there's one where a little underground dwelling monster crawls out of a woman's garden and claims to be in love with her, and she kills him with her mind. I thought that was great. I really liked the one where there's this guy and he gets possessed by the spirit of a dancing dwarf. Very much enjoyed that one as well. I also really did enjoy some of the slightly more grounded ones. They're all very surreal. So I did like the one where there's a man on a Sunday afternoon. He goes looking for his cat and he meets a weird girl wearing some sunglasses. That was quite good. Other ones, I don't really remember anything about them. They left absolutely no impact on me whatsoever, which is why this is a 3-star read, because there were some top tier 4-star, 5-star short stories, and there were some bottom tier 2-star stories. So I've said the whole book was 3 stars. It also took me a really long time to read. I don't understand why it took me so long to read. It just felt like the prose was very dense. It was very hard to get through for me. Next was City of Stin by Bobby Adair. This is the 7th book in the Slow Burn series, which is a post-apocalyptic zombie type series that I have read too much of. City of Stin was okay. It unfortunately suffered from that middle of the series drag. There are 9 books, so 7 is still susceptible to that middle of the series drag where nothing really happens. We need to introduce something new, but we don't really know where we're going. And unfortunately that happens in City of Stin. And yes, it is Stin, not Sin. They make a joke about it right at the end of the book because the book is set in Austin, Texas. So that is where that comes from. And basically what happens is the main characters, Murphy and Zed, they kind of bum about Austin for a bit, and then they meet a new type of slow burn that's different to them because they are, for whatever reason, they're infected, but they've maintained all of their faculties. They're basically perfectly fine. They just have a bit of a temperature and really pale skin. And then they meet this other set of slow burns that come from a different area of Texas and aren't, like, as in control of their faculties, but they're not pale. And that's really all we find out about them. And then we meet a group of slow burns who are the same type of slow burn, which is what they call themselves. I feel like I should explain that. This is what the people who are infected call themselves because they're burning slowly. They meet this other group, and the soldiers that Zed and Murphy rescued from the different group of slow burns say, yo, we're looking at making a vaccine, come with us to this other part of Texas. And 2 of the women from the last group they met say, yeah, we're in, and then Zed and Murphy go, yeah, we're in, and everyone packs into a van and the book ends. Nothing happens in this book. I think it was just a vehicle for moving the story forwards, and it just took a lot of extra words to explain how the story was moving forwards. I didn't really vibe with it, but then I do really enjoy reading series to the end. And I'm not going to DNF the series because I genuinely think book 8 and book 9 will end on an absolute banger. So this was 3 stars for me, purely for being middle of the pack. And my last 5-star read for November was The Call of Cthulhu and Other Weird Stories by H.P. Lovecraft. I don't really like classic literature, but I chose to read H.P. Lovecraft's works of my own volition because I'm weird like that and also really like cosmic horror. These stories were okay. I thought they were just a random collection to start with, but they're actually in chronological order. So his earlier works are at the start of the book, and then his later works are at the end of the book. That's what chronological means, Ash. You really didn't need to explain that. The later stories were definitely some of the more memorable ones. I really enjoyed Shadow over Innsmouth. I really enjoyed The Haunter in the Darkness and The Whisperer in the Dark, which I think are the last 3 stories in the book. Unfortunately, the one that I was most looking forward to reading, which was The Color Out of Space, wasn't as good. It felt like it dragged, and the concept didn't really carry the story along. It just kind of, dragged a little bit. It was really weird. Other than that, not a lot of the other stories made much of an impression. His earlier works definitely didn't have that really cosmic horror feel to them. They just felt a bit like weird stories. And then you get to Call of Cthulhu, which is okay. It's not the best writing that I've ever read. And once again, as is classic with this classic literature, the prose is really dense. There's just a lot to read, and this took me a really long time to get through as well. And some of the stories are like 100 pages long. They're basically novellas rather than short stories. But either way, this gets 3 stars for the same reason the Murakami book earlier gets 3 stars, because some of the stories were really good, some of them were really naff, and I just kind of averaged it out and put it in the middle, so there we go. Moving on to 4-star reads, I read Meddling Kids by Edgar Cantero. Now, I don't think that this is a spoiler, because it literally gives it away in the first few pages of the book. But if you want to go into this completely blind, be aware that I'm going to be talking about this. This is a cosmic horror novel. I did not realise that when I picked it up. I thought it was going to be a thriller. I am an idiot because it says tentacle horror on the back of the book, and I just somehow managed to miss that. So I really enjoyed this book because I love cosmic horror. It's one of my favourite types of horror genres. I really enjoy it. It was really well written throughout, but it kind of did this really weird thing where sometimes it would insert text in brackets and italics like stage directions for when you were reading a screenplay, and then the dialogue would also sometimes swap to a script format. And I, for a little while, thought that this was building to some kind of Truman Show type thing where we find out the characters are actually just filming a show, but it doesn't really go anywhere. It looks like it's just a stylistic choice that I didn't really like because it ruined my immersion, because I was reading and then it would swap to script format and I would go, oh, I'm in a book. Oh no. It would have been a 5-star book if not for the fact it kept swapping formats and a few other things. But other than that, the characters were really likable. I liked the way they embodied the archetypes of the Scooby-Doo gang while also subverting them at the same time. I like the fact that it was a cosmic horror book because that is just a genre that I really like, and I feel like it was quite surprising to me at least because I just didn't read the back of the book properly. It's really interesting to read as well because I've never been to like Lovecraft country or America at all. I don't know why I said it like that. Yeah, I've never been to America, so it was described really well. I really felt like I was in the moment with the characters. One other reason why it's not 5 stars, even though I loved it so much, is it's just paced really weirdly. So they kind of give away the twist in the first few pages of the book, and then the gang's all back together and back in their childhood holiday town, which is where the story takes place, within like the first 100 pages. I thought this was going to be more of a let's get the gang back together caper. However, it is still wonderfully written. It's the only horror story that I've had to put down for a little while, not because the cosmic horror itself was very scary, but there are some descriptions when the characters go underground into a cave system, and I'm not claustrophobic, but I had to put the book down and just take a breather because I was getting really anxious and claustrophobic just from the descriptions of the cave. So the book is very vivid, it's very well written. I need to stop saying this because I'm going to start questioning why I even put it in 4 stars, even though I know why I put it in 4 stars. So yeah, it's a very good book, it just suffers from some pacing issues and some weird stylistic choices. Next we have Dear Child by Romy Hausman. This was an odd find for me, it just popped up on my Kindle so I bought it because I have no impulse control. It's a German thriller novel that is described as starting after the point where a thriller story ends. So basically what happens is there's this woman, Frau Grass, and she ends up in the hospital having escaped her captor with her daughter, Hannah, and she has a connection to a woman called Lena who has been missing for several years. I can't say too much about this story because I really feel like you should go into it blind. It was very good, it was very well written. You experience the point of view of multiple characters, and each character has a very significant, strong voice, so I didn't muddle them up very often. What I didn't necessarily enjoy the most, though, was one of the characters speaks a lot in the second person, like they are talking to someone else. There is a diegetic reason for that, but it was just very jarring because I don't really read a lot of novels that are in the second person. So yeah, it was a bit jarring, but it made sense within the novel, and it was a really good way of describing stuff and really helped you to feel what the character was feeling because she was basically telling you it. The only thing that I really didn't enjoy was the ending. For me personally was very unsatisfying, but I am never satisfied with the ending of thriller novels because I've just read so many of them. I can kind of see what's coming, but the reason why this one was so unsatisfying is that I didn't see what was coming, and I don't think anyone else would either, because I personally don't think it was foreshadowed very well. But you know, that is for everyone else to decide. It would have been a 5-star book if the ending hadn't disappointed me so much. The next 4-star read I have is a manga. I read the first 2 volumes of Blood on the Tracks by Shuzo Oshimi. This is a really dark story. I highly recommend, if you think you'll be interested in this, I really do recommend looking up the content warnings, because there are some really shocking scenes and themes throughout. However, I really enjoyed it, which makes me sound like such a psychopath. So it's a thriller manga that follows a young boy and kind of plots his relationship with his mum and how that progresses. And let me tell you, it gets really weird and really dark. The only way I can describe the atmosphere in the book and the feeling it gives me is it's the same as the movie Parasite, where you know something's gonna go wrong. You know that it's building to something, but you have no idea what it's building to and no idea when the payoff's gonna come. So you're sat there the whole time thinking, oh my god, what's gonna happen? What's coming next? Or what's going to happen? And then it happens, and then you have to put the book down and breathe because it's that build up. It's so good. And what really helps with this is the visuals, the artwork. It has a really scratchy, shaky, scribbly style to it, which I really hope is on purpose, because that adds to the anxiety that the book induces and just generally makes it feel overall much more tense. It's such a good series. I wish that I could tell you more about the plot without just spoiling everything, but I highly recommend it, but I do also recommend looking up the content warnings. And now we're on to my 3 5-star reads, which I genuinely cannot believe I had this month. I really didn't think that I would have any 5-star reads because I'm just really picky with what I give that rating to. But the first one is Rivers of London by Ben Aaronovitch. I am proper vibing with urban fantasy at the moment. It's some of my favorite stuff to read. And the way that Ben Aaronovitch writes is very light and full of humor. It's really fast paced. It's really well written, the descriptions are really on point as well, and it does that thing with urban fantasy novels that I really like, where the main character just doesn't question it all that much. The main character is a police officer called Peter Grant. He finds out that he is a wizard, and he joins a special branch of the police made for wizards. He is a wizard's apprentice. He's 25, which is also great because I usually find that this sort of story is aimed more at youngsters, so the main character will be like between 14 and 18, whereas with Peter Grant being 25, it's very much more of an adult novel. It's more geared towards grown-ups, shall I say, and I really like that. But he doesn't really question anything. He talks to a ghost, and then someone points out, yo, you know that was a ghost? And he goes, ah, sweet. And that is literally my favorite thing with urban fantasy. It's my favorite trope, when the main character, the chosen one, just goes, yeah, alright then. Rivers of London also blends the fantasy elements in with the more realistic elements really well, which is something I enjoy as well, because I find in a lot of low fantasy novels like this, things tend to be very separate. Like take the Percy Jackson novels, for example. The kids go to Camp Half-Blood, they're separated from everyone else. There's the mist that means that the regulars, the normies, can't see any of the mythical stuff, and it's very separate. Whereas in Rivers of London, it feels a bit more integrated. It affects normal people rather than it just being something that they don't see or something they immediately forget about. Like, it's definitely a thing. And it's also, this is going to go on forever, it's also a crime procedural because Peter Grant is a police officer. the novel involves him solving a crime, and it's a series, so I get a whole series of crimes with just weird and wacky magical elements. I'm already reading Moon Over Soho, which is the second one, and I'm fully invested in this series. Once I was done being uplifted by Rivers of London, I depressed myself thoroughly by reading Downfall by Inio Asano. This is another manga that I really recommend looking up the content warnings on if you want to read it, but it is basically exactly like all of Inio Asano's other work. It's really dreary and depressing, but oh my god, I am just so addicted to it, and it really hits home emotionally. It's one of those manga, again, that you really have to think about, and it's so beautifully illustrated as well, just like all of his work. I'm such an Inio Asano fangirl. The story is about a manga artist who is becoming disillusioned with the industry, his marriage is falling apart, and he's struggling to find an idea for his next series, and it just kind of tracks his life for a period of time. It's very depressing. It is not a happy book, but I don't just give 5 stars to happy books. I give 5 stars to books that affect me emotionally, and this affected me emotionally. I was in a funk for days after reading this. So yeah, it's really good. Like I said, it really makes you kind of just think about life. The characters are written so realistically. The story itself is quite realistic too. And yeah, just very deeply emotionally affecting. Lovely stuff. 5 stars. And the last book that I read in November was Circe by Madeline Miller. I had some reservations, let me say that, because I know Circe is very much involved with Odysseus in the mythology. I had to read the Odyssey for my classics A-level, and I hated it. I absolutely despised it. It ruined my love of classic mythology because I just didn't like any of the characters. I didn't like Odysseus, I didn't like Telemachus, I didn't like Penelope, I didn't really like Circe either. It was just so annoying because I didn't really get on with any of them. So yeah, definitely had some reservations, but I was hooked from the first sentence. Like, I'm not over exaggerating, I was hooked from the first sentence, and it was surprising to see how much of the mythology was included. I don't want to brag, but I'm quite familiar with Greek mythology. Obviously, it is a retelling of all of the mythology surrounding Circe, and it is from Circe's point of view, which is what I really liked. Because having it written from a woman's point of view was fantastic. You don't often get that. A lot of the poetry from back then, such as the Aeneid, the Iliad, the Odyssey, was all written from a male point of view by a male writer. And the contrast here is amazing. It really builds Circe up as a strong, independent character. She's amazing. Also, despite being a retelling and my familiarity with Greek mythology, it felt very fresh and new and just, it was lovely to read. It was so fast-paced. Every sentence flowed beautifully into the next. The description was really good, and I really felt what the characters were feeling, which is why this book gets 5 stars. There is a slightly more petty reason that I would have given this book 5 stars, even if I'd hated it, because I hate Odysseus, and this book makes it really clear that he is an absolute dick. The main thing that made me hate the Odyssey, like, with such a passion, is that Odysseus was always held up as, oh, he's a hero, he can do no wrong, cheats on his wife, gets his men killed. But no, he's perfect, he's Odysseus. And this book portrays him as not that great, to be honest with you, and I would have given it 5 stars for that alone. But it is a fully realised 5-star book. It was just so amazing. I'm really glad I picked it up. So there we go, that is my November wrap-up, which is going up very late because I don't plan very well. Oh well, it's here now. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and if you haven't already, please make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss any more videos. Hopefully, I will see you next time for some more book talk.